Have you wondered why you would complain about everything all the time, even though you know that doing so is unhealthy? Coming home complaining about why dinner isn't ready? We sometimes even complain about not having enough time for our important work right after a lavish party. How can we stop such negative impulses?
But look at yourselves! This world you've built is bound by villainy.
Our hosts began to pass the Turing test after the first year. That wasn't enough for Arnold. He wasn't interested in the appearance of intellect, of wit. He wanted the real thing. He wanted to create consciousness. See, Arnold built a version of their cognition in which the hosts heard their programming as an inner monologue. It's a way to bootstrap consciousness.
After Dolores began to explore her consciousness, she ran to the white church. When she opened the door, she saw the church attenders crying, arguing, cursing, some yelling to the empty space. It appeared that they were all suffering. But what is the message? The characters were suffering without knowing the why themselves. They were looking for solutions of their inner suffering from the outside world, hoping to find answers through the religious dogma which the church represents. But that clearly didn't help.
Little girl, what is this? What does it mean?
Don't waste your breath, lady. That thing's part of their so-called religion. Ain't none of them's gonna tell you nothing about that.
In fact, Dolores' next act speaks to the true path to salvation, confronting one's own shadow through self-discovery. That is why she took the elevator to the basement, the underworld, where she explored her own inner chambers of light and shadow.
Arnold? Arnold, we need to talk.
Have you wondered why you would complain about everything all the time, even though you know that doing so is unhealthy? Coming home complaining about why dinner isn't ready? We sometimes even complain about not having enough time for our important work right after a lavish party. How can we stop such negative impulses? Our negative impulses belong to the dark side of the unconscious, which Jung calls the shadow. To stop complaining, it is essential to forthrightly confront one's own shadow, to recognize his own dark side and integrate it.
No one else sees it. This thing in me. Even I didn't see it at first. And then one day, it was there. This stain I never noticed before. Tiny flicker of darkness. Invisible to everyone. But I could see nothing else. Till finally I understood that the darkness wasn't some mark from something I'd done, some regrettable decision I'd made. I was shedding my skin. The darkness was what was underneath. It was mine all along. And I decided how much of it I let into the world. I tried to do right. I was faithful, generous.
That is precisely what the man in black did. Of course, it wasn't easy as he confessed to his wife only after decades of marriage.
I built a wall and tried to protect you. And Emily.
The difficulty stems from the need to project onto the other a judgment we cannot accept for ourselves, and the impulse to justify our superior existence by belittling others. Here lies the weakness of man. He defaults to projecting his dark side to the outside, and thus it is always easier to see the demon in others than in himself.
Then you're fired.
That happened in Nazi Germany, where all the shadows of the Nazi party members were projected to the Jews. It was always the Jews that caused the problems. It also happened in the Cold War, when the Soviets blamed the suffering of their own citizens on the evils of the Western capitalists. Could it also be happening in today's polarized political parties, where one identity group keeps blaming another? The unconscious urge to project the inner discomfort onto others drives the impulse to complain. In Westworld, it was the humans who created the robots, but they failed to recognize that the robots' revolt was the humans' own doing. Instead, the humans blamed all the evil on the robots and thought they were the villains. No one sees that clearer than the head of the narrative, Mr. Lee Sizemore, hence his last speech.
And the lesson is, if you're looking for a reckoning is what you'll find.
Sir, put down your weapon!
If you're looking for a villain, then I'm your man.
Sir, drop your weapon!
But look at yourselves. This world you built is bound by villainy.
And he died, because obviously it must have been him who was the villain, not the ones who shot him.
They cannot see the things that will hurt them. I've spared them that.
Precisely because it is always someone else's fault, complaining deprives us of the precious opportunities to reflect on ourselves, on our own shadow. If such practices are not made conscious, over time, they evolve into an eternal loop of looking for others' weaknesses, one after another, to justify one's own painful existence. That weakens our personality because each time we project our shadow outside, it subconsciously reminds us of our inability to take notice of something dark within.
What the fuck are you doing?
I'm calling for help.
What? For who?
In an urge to get distracted from confronting our darkness, we keep searching for the weaknesses in others with our own judgments, which in turn only reflects our own weaknesses.
The fuck over!
That process gives temporary comfort to the psyche, but over time, it inevitably keeps weakening the personality, making one stray further and further away from self-realization, which is the source of meaning. How then can we stop complaining and start taking personal responsibilities?
I could help you.